You probably know by now that I bloomin' love a good list. Work to-do lists, top threes, top tens, top 8 tracks, a luxury and a book, whatever form they take, I'm in. Love them. So when I found myself on a 17-hour overnight coach journey between Iguazu and Sao Paulo in Brazil a few years ago, a trip which might otherwise have been quite relaxing had it not been for a crying child for most of the night, I found myself enjoyably passing the time by writing out a few top 10 lists. Top 10 TV shows I like, theatre visits, books, films, sports events, and many more, including the ones on your screen now. And hopefully as I speak, that's still up, not my ever sweaty face. Maybe you agree with some of those choices, maybe you disagree. And yes, you can see obvious omissions, concealed names, bad handwriting, and poor spelling. I mean, the Forth Bridge, I can never return there. They'll chase me out of town. And back to my shining face. Now! Hi. So you might be thinking, yeah, wildlife encounters, bad travel experiences, and architectural wonders might make for interesting, if quite pretentious, top 10 categories, but not so much bridges. Well, if you think that, we shall have to agree to disagree. As well as loving lists, I love bridges. I mean, the engineering genius behind them alone blows my mind, but then there's the beauty that they often have, the journeys they allow, the metaphors they provide, love them. And I'm not just saying this for effect. I counted up all the art and photos and collages I've got around my house. I counted up how many has bridges, such as this one. And around my house, 6 paintings or photos or photographs have bridges within them. I do genuinely love bridges. So 2 years ago, when we were celebrating the 70th birthday of the NHS, which is 72 today, I was chuffed to enjoy a few phenomenal bridges on the journey between Rhyl and Cardiff. Hopefully you're seeing them now. And maybe you even recognise some, like the one with the narrowboat. Do you know that one? It is the absolutely stunning, though for me hard to pronounce, Pontgysyllta aqueduct. It's near Llangollen, which is one of the 3 UNESCO World Heritage Sites in Wales. 10 points if you can name the other 2. Well, in today's Bible reading, the action takes place at another aqueduct, this one in Jerusalem. So strap yourselves in, make yourself a cup of tea. This is quite a long reading, a whole chapter, as we turn to the second book of Kings, chapter 18. Take it away, Walklings.
Reading from 2 Kings chapter 18.
The whole chapter.
In the 3rd year of Hoshea, son of Elah, king of Israel, Hezekiah, son of Ahaz, began his rule over Judah. He was 25 years old when he became king, and he ruled for 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Abijah, daughter of Zechariah. In God's opinion, he was a good king. He kept to the standards of his ancestor David. He got rid of the local fertility shrines, smashed the phallic stone monuments, and cut down the sex and religion Asherah groves. As a final stroke, he pulverised the ancient bronze serpent that Moses had made. At the time, the Israelites had taken up the practice of sacrificing to it. They'd even dignified it with the name, Nehushtan, the old serpent.
Hezekiah put his whole trust in the God of Israel. There was no king quite like him, either before or after. He held fast to God, never loosened his grip, and obeyed to the letter everything God had commanded Moses. And God, for his part, held fast to him through all his adventures.
He revolted against the king of Assyria. He refused to serve him one more day, and he drove back the Philistines, whether in sentry outposts or fortress cities, all the way to Gaza and its borders.
In the 4th year of Hezekiah, and the 7th year of Hoshea, son of Elah, king of Israel, Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, attacked Samaria. He threw a siege around it, and after 3 years captured it. It was the 6th year of Hezekiah and the 9th year of Hoshea that Samaria fell to Assyria. The king of Assyria took Israel into exile and relocated them in Hala, in Gozan on the Habor River, and in the towns of the Medes.
All this happened because they wouldn't listen to the voice of their God and treated his covenant with careless contempt. They refused either to listen or to do a word of what Moses, the servant of God, commanded.
In the 14th year of Hezekiah, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, attacked the outlying fortress cities of Judah and captured them.
King Hezekiah sent a message to the king of Assyria at his headquarters in Lachish. "I've done wrong, I admit it. Pull back your army. I'll pay you whatever tribute you set."
The king of Assyria demanded tribute from Hezekiah, king of Judah, 11 tons of silver and a ton of gold. Hezekiah turned over all the silver he could find in the temple of God and in the palace treasuries. Hezekiah even took down the doors of the temple of God and the doorposts that he had overlaid with gold and gave them to the king of Assyria.
So the king of Assyria sent his top 3 military chiefs, the Tartan, the Rabsaris, and the Rabshakeh from Lachish, with a strong military force to King Hezekiah in Jerusalem. When they arrived at Jerusalem, they stopped at the aqueduct of the upper pool on the road to the laundry commons. They called loudly for the king. Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, who was in charge of the palace, Shebna, the royal secretary, and Joas, son of Asaph, the court historian, went out to meet them. The third officer, the Rabshakeh, was their spokesman. He said,
"Tell Hezekiah a message from the great king, the king of Assyria. You're living in the world of make-believe, of pious fantasy. Do you think that mere words are any substitute for military strategy and troops? Now that you have revolted against me, who can you expect to help you? You thought Egypt would, but Egypt's nothing but a paper tiger. One puff of wind and she collapses. Pharaoh, king of Egypt, is nothing but bluff and bluster. Or are you going to tell me we really rely on God?" But Hezekiah has just eliminated most of the people's access to God by getting rid of all the local God shrines, offering everyone in Judea and Jerusalem, and ordering everyone in Judah and Jerusalem, "You must worship at Jerusalem altar only."
"So be reasonable. Make a deal with my master, the king of Assyria. I'll give you 2,000 horses if you think you can provide riders for them." "You can't do it." "Well then, how do you think you're going to turn back even one raw buck private from my master's troops? How long are you going to hold on to that figment of your imagination, those hoped-for Egyptian chariots and horses? Do you think I've come here to destroy this country without the express approval of God? The fact is, God expressly ordered me to attack and destroy this country."
Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, and Shebna and Joah said to the Rabshakeh,
"Please speak to us in Aramaic language. We understand Aramaic. Don't speak in Hebrew. Everybody crowded on the city walls can hear you."
But the Rabshakeh said, "We weren't sent with a private message to your master and you. This is public, a message to everyone within earshot. After all, they're involved in this as well as you. If you don't come to terms, they'll be eating their own turds and drinking their own pee right along with you."
Then he stepped forward and spoke in Hebrew, loud enough for everyone to hear.
"Listen carefully to the words of the great king, the king of Assyria. Do not let Hezekiah fool you. He can't save you. And don't let Hezekiah give you that line about trusting in God, telling you God will save us. This city will never be abandoned to the king of Assyria. Don't listen to Hezekiah. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Listen to the king of Assyria. Deal with me and live the good life. I'll guarantee everyone your own plot of ground, a garden and a well. I'll take you to a land sweeter by far than this one, a land of grain and wine, bread and vineyards, olive orchards and honey. You'll only live once, so live, really live.
No, don't listen to Hezekiah. Don't listen to his lies telling you God will save us. Has there ever been a God anywhere who delivered anyone from the king of Assyria? Where are the gods of Hamath and Arpad? Where are the gods of Sepharvaim, Hena and Iva and Samaria? Did their gods save them? Can you name a God who saved anyone from anywhere from me, the king of Assyria? So what makes you think your God can save Jerusalem from me?
The people were silent. No one spoke a word, for the king had ordered, "Don't anyone say a word, not one word."
Then Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, the palace administrator, and Shebna, the royal secretary, and Joah, son of Asaph, the court historian, went back to Hezekiah. They had ripped their robes in despair. They reported to Hezekiah the speech of the Rabshakeh.
Okay, I know. Long passage, tough names, and confusing action. Aren't you pleased I didn't ask you to do that reading? But if you stay with that passage a little longer, you get some really juicy stuff. So what is happening? Well, we join the action when Israel has split into two kingdoms. The kingdom of Israel with Samaria as the capital in the north, and the kingdom of Judah with Jerusalem as capital in the south. We hear that the great empire of Assyria has captured Samaria and taken Israel into exile. So they've gone. And now they have their sights on Judah, because the Judean king, Hezekiah, good guy, was faithful to God and refused to serve Assyria. So the king of Assyria starts attacking the towns on the outskirts of Judah, of the Judean kingdom, and the king, Hezekiah, gets a bit concerned and seeks a compromise. Stop attacking us and I'll give you loads of money, which the Assyrian king accepts, before then sending 3 of his top men to Jerusalem, along with a big old threatening army. So Hezekiah sends 3 of his top men to do a deal with the 3 from Assyria, and they meet by an aqueduct. I'm imagining it's this gorgeous, glistening, elegantly designed, beautiful water bridge, but that's not important. So 3 men from Assyria, 3 from lowly Judah meet. The Assyrians taunt the Judeans by saying that the Assyrian king is more powerful than their God. And they throw in some weird threats about eating feces and drinking urine. And the 3 Judeans go home upset and in despair. End of chapter. For those of you on the edge of your seats, it does turn out okay for Judah. The prophet Isaiah advises King Hezekiah, prays. God kills 185,000 Assyrian soldiers. A little bit awkward. The Assyrian king runs home and gets murdered by his. So as I say, there's a lot going on here. Slavery and dehumanization of the other that we've been looking at over the past few weeks. The issue of empire and oppression of foreigners. Real questions about God's love of smiting in the Hebrew Testament. Loads. But today I just want us to talk about language. And for that we concentrate on just one seemingly innocuous verse. Verse 26. Which says, Eliakim, son of Hilkiah and Shebna and Joah, said to the Rabshakeh, got those pronunciations all wrong, please speak to us in the Aramaic language. We understand Aramaic. Don't speak in Hebrew. Everyone on the crowded city wall can hear you. Yeah, it wasn't the verse in that passage which was going to stand out to you. And yet, I've read more theological articles on this verse than I have of any other part of the story. Truth be told, I had to remind myself what was going on in the wider story. You see, the American Reformed theologian Walter Brueggemann played with this verse in a way that has inspired many other commentators and which I think is relevant for the church today. Brueggemann points out that there are two types of conversation going on in the passage. First, there is the conversation at the city wall by the aqueduct in Aramaic, where the representative of the Assyrian Empire talks with the agents of King Hezekiah. Then there is the conversation behind the wall in Hebrew, where the faith community take the power of Yahweh seriously. Brueggemann extrapolates this to suggest that Christians need to be bilingual, to know how to speak the language of the empire in the public square, and also to speak the language of faith behind the wall, where a different set of assumptions and a different perception of the world is at work. He argues that both these conversations are necessary for the Christian faith. For if we stop the conversation at the wall, we'll just be a sectarian and inward-looking group. Whilst if we stop the conversation behind the wall, the language and the assumptions of the empire will dominate our faith. Does that make sense? Am I making that clear? Probably not. So let me try putting it another way. The Christian faith can seem very bizarre, foreign even, to many of our friends in the wider community. Even in a country like ours, in which the Christian language was forced upon most people, today our beliefs, stories, and language can seem archaic, irrelevant, and alien to most people. I'm guessing that some of you didn't even look up today's reading. Some of those who got the script, not the video. And if they did, that they might have skipped a few verses. Or you, looking at the video, you maybe groaned when you saw how long today's one would be. And you're the ones, by and large, who speak the language behind the wall, who are aware of the Christian language and grammar. So just imagine what reaction you'd get if you spoke to a non-Christian friend about Hezekiah, Sennacherib, and the Rabshakeh. And yet Brueggemann and I would argue that these stories and the language help us to frame, understand, and practice our faith. I'm not one for the whole church versus the world way of thinking. The evidence of God's presence outside the church and sometimes absence within it is enough to put that to bed. But I am one who truly believes that the Jesus story must be shared in a way that it can be heard. For it is good news for individuals, communities, and all creation. From the climate crisis to Black Lives Matter, individual struggles to global pandemics, I believe that authentic dialogue, and by that I do mean speaking and listening, between those within the church, behind the wall, and those outside the church, at the wall, could transform all the participants. Our conservative sisters and brothers might stick to their street preaching and world judging, and our more liberal siblings might balk at the speaking part of this conversation. But I believe that we are called to listen and to speak, at the wall and behind the wall, in the public sphere and at church, that we are called to be bilingual and to engage in all of those conversations. All of which brings us back to bridges. Stay with me, for they are the natural place where people of different worldviews, languages, and stories might cross, might go over any boundaries and encounter one another, just as happened in our biblical passage at the aqueduct. For bridges are built for bilinguality, and hopefully now you're looking at a photo of, let's call it the Severn Bridge, and a Welcome to Wales sign in English and in Welsh. So this week, when I engaged on my first weekly Wednesday prayer walk around the community, I was between two funerals at Glyntav, and so I walked around Treforest and came across this side. Hopefully now you can see the Castle Inn footbridge, which is just a few steps away from our Castle Square Chapel on one side, and on the other Cardiff Road, where homes, including some of those within our church community, are still being refurbished post-flood. As you can see, the bridge is still closed and will need to be knocked down and replaced because of the damage done to it by Storm Dennis in February. On my way home from Treforest, I walked through the park and passed by both the soon-to-be opened new bridge and the trusty, iconic old bridge, which of course was initially called the New Bridge. So 3 footbridges, one not fit for purpose and at risk of collapse, one built for the future and which will open up access for many, one sturdy, beautiful and built to last. Now it might be a somewhat stark contrast, but which bridge do you think best represents our churches? In terms of enabling meaningful encounters between the community and the church, of enabling bilingual conversations and storytelling, which bridge could stand as a pictorial parable of our churches? Perhaps, of course, our churches contain elements of all 3. Perhaps the changing waters of today have made parts of our church life unfit for purpose, at risk of collapse. Perhaps some of what we do was good and right for one time, but the cultural climate has changed, the waters have risen, and now might be the right time to say that their time of service has come to an end. Perhaps some of our church life is like the old bridge. It's been around for years and will continue to do so. It's beautiful and solid and might need the odd bit of upkeep, but otherwise it's pretty sound and will serve travellers for years to come, albeit perhaps fewer of them. If you're honest, when was the last time you walked over that bridge? And perhaps some of our church life will have to be like the new bridge in the park. Costly, disruptive, a cause for grumbling for some and excitement for others, but ultimately a walkway that opens up accessibility and the opportunity for more journeys and conversation for years to come. As some churches in England return to severely amended services of worship, and churches in Wales are soon likely to follow suit, now is an opportune time to assess our ecclesial engineering. Not to simply rush back to our previous structures, nor to necessarily ditch them, but instead to reflect on what is good and solid and beautiful, what might need to be pulled down, and what might need to be newly built. If you think about it, during this time of lockdown, we have been a church. Here at St David's Uniting Church, here at Castle Square United Reformed Church, here as churches across the UK. We have been churches without traditional worship, meetings, even buildings. How much of this has been necessary, temporary, debilitating, and how much has been liberating, has reached more people, and could be more permanent? For most church communities across the world, the pandemic has brought questions of identity, language, purpose, and survival into sharper focus, and many tough conversations will need to be had. But as we saw in today's reading, communities of faith have always faced change. They've always been in flux. What saved Hezekiah and the kingdom of Judah, albeit temporarily, it has to be said, was that with the help of the prophet Isaiah, they listened to God, the God who leads us by still waters and is still with us in turbulent seas, the God who bridged any gap between the human and divine by becoming one of us, who shared the wonder of God's love in a language that ordinary people could understand, the God who moved as a rushing wind, enabling Jesus' friends to speak multilingually, and who calls us to do the same today. I've never been good at linguistics. I can't even say the word. I've got no skills at engineering. But if together we listen faithfully and act courageously, we might rebuild a beautiful bridge where all languages might be spoken, all stories heard, and all people might experience the glory of God. A bridge truly worthy of any top 10. Amen.
Helo!
Hi all! Sorry we can't be with you tonight.
Sorry bod ni methu bod na heno. I didn't know.